Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. It took just weeks for President Trump's tariffs to escalate into a full-blown trade war with China. Now, with a temporary pause, tensions appear to have cooled, but only on the surface. Both countries are on the move. During his recent Gulf tour, Trump signed a major arms deal with Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, China is preparing for the upcoming ASEAN-Gulf summit, where it's expected to rally nations against U.S. tariffs. With hundreds of billions of dollars at stake, could this rivalry spill into new arenas, forcing other nations to choose sides? China's early presence in the Middle East was about energy security. It's still one of the region's biggest oil customers. But today, Beijing's ambitions are far broader. It helped broker the 2023 Iran-Saudi rapprochement, voiced strong support for Palestine, and continues to back Iran in nuclear talks. The U.S. is staying active, too. Over just a few weeks, Trump forged a ceasefire with Yemen's Houthi rebels, opened talks with Iran, and eased sanctions on Syria. Meanwhile, Turkey is deepening ties with China, cooperating on Ukraine, backing Palestine, and pledging support for Syria's post-war reconstruction. But as both powers turn their focus to Central Asia, where strategic stakes run high, a question emerges. Are Turkey and China becoming partners or rivals in a new great game? To discuss where Turkey stands in the growing U.S.-China rivalry, joining me now from Dubai is Victor Gao, the Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization. Victor, thanks for joining me. A lot to talk about with you. I'm excited for this conversation. I want to start with Trump's tariffs. How is the whole tariff saga playing out? Is China where it wants to be right now? Is it the victor, or has Trump stalemated?
Thank you very much for having me. President Trump's tariff war against the rest of the world, including against China, is the wrong war to start with. It's not constructive, it's not helpful. It will never achieve the declared goal of moving manufacturing jobs back to the United States, and it is doomed to failure. China is the country which steps up and retaliates against all these astronomical levels of tariffs against Chinese exports to the United States. Therefore, we ended up with a situation, very dangerous situation, of 145% tariff imposed by the United States against Chinese exports to the United States, and Chinese retaliatory tariffs at 125% against U.S. exports to China. This means that China-U.S. trade might grind to a complete halt if it is not addressed properly. Fortunately, over the weekend in Geneva, the Chinese negotiators and the American counterparts demonstrated wisdom and courage to reach preliminary agreements to significantly scale down the tariffs launched by both countries against each other. Now, this actually created a rare moment in history where free trade seems to be the winner, and both China and the United States wanted to do the right thing. And I think we do not need to go back as to which country blinked or not, because it's irrelevant. I think the fact that the United States significantly scaled down the tariffs against Chinese exports to the United States at the insistence of China means that free trade is the winner. And both China and the United States need to do the right thing to make sure that nobody should push around free trade, and free trade needs to be protected, not only for China and the United States, but for mankind as a whole.
I think one of the most interesting parts of this whole saga for me, from my observation, was when Trump announced the tariffs. Many of the heads of states from Europe and other countries picking up the phone very quickly, trying to sit down and negotiate. We saw that type of trend until China, where China was like, hold on, we're going to slap our own tariffs. No, we're not ready to talk right now. How do you analyze China's posture during this, and after the way it acted, or after the way it composed itself vis-a-vis Xi Jinping and Donald Trump? Did you see more countries gather some courage against this tariff action by the United States?
Well, first of all, the U.S. global tariff war against all the countries in the world is very much the wrong war, as I emphasized. However, different countries given their respective circumstances, the size of the economy, the relations with the United States, and many other factors, may decide to react to the U.S. global tariff war differently. It's fully understandable. However, from the Chinese perspective, China will never allow any country, including the United States, to bully China. China will never tolerate any country, including the United States, to push around China. If any country strikes China in the cheek, China will strike back. So if the United States wants to impose astronomical tariffs against China, China will retaliate by imposing astronomical tariffs against the United States. Now, China is doing the right thing to protect its legitimate interest, including its sovereignty and territorial integrity. And by doing so, China demonstrated its commitment to do the right thing and its firm opposition to any country bullying China. Now, in doing so, very importantly, China is also defending free trade. And by defending free trade, it's not just for China's economic gains or losses, it's for the benefit of all countries in the world. Therefore, I think we need to acknowledge one thing. The global trade war, the global tariff war launched by the United States is the wrong war. Different countries may decide to react to that differently, but China is opposing that. China really drew the line in the sand, and China really stiffened up and increased the tariffs against the United States, forcing the United States onto the negotiation table. And what happened in Geneva this weekend shows that the United States acknowledged that they had no other option but to scale down the tariffs against the Chinese exports. Because if they didn't do that, do you know what will be the result? The inventory in the United States will run out. The supermarkets will be empty. And the people may suffer the consequences in the United States. If anyone in the United States indulges in the fantasy that they can achieve decoupling between China and the United States, they probably want to do similar things by decoupling the Earth from the moon. First of all, they don't want to try to do that. Secondly, even if they try to do that, they will not succeed. Thirdly, if they succeed in decoupling the moon from the Earth or the United States from China, they may end up with greater catastrophe.
I want to ask you about another major development in your region, the conflict between, I shouldn't say conflict, skirmish between India and Pakistan. It seems to have subsided right now. How did you evaluate what happened over the past couple of weeks and the way it ended? Is this in China's favor?
Well, a couple of very brief observations because of lack of time. First of all, there was a terrorist attack. Secondly, whenever you have a terrorist attack, the right way to deal with that is to do a thorough investigation before you really take any actions. India decided to launch military attack against Pakistan, which raised the tension between the two countries, and Pakistan decided to strike back. Now, everyone needs to work very hard to calm down the situation, but eventually what happened was a very serious aerial confrontation between India and Pakistan. This is probably one of the largest aerial confrontation between two countries in modern history. Now, what happened in that aerial confrontation is, according to the observation and the information available to me, that Pakistan had a home run and India suffered a huge loss. Now, however India decided to describe itself, that's their business. And fortunately, both countries decided to de-escalate, and now I hope there is restored peace and stability between India and Pakistan. Allow me to emphasize one thing. War between India and Pakistan will be extremely dangerous because both are armed with nuclear weapons, and we do not want to see war and instability on the Indian subcontinent. Peace and stability will ensure that prosperity may be delivered to the Indian people as well as the Pakistani people. Now, for China, China is a staunch friend, brothers and sisters of Pakistan, but China does not want to see war breaking out between India and Pakistan. But allow me to emphasize, no country, no one in the world should second-guess China's commitment to defend the legitimate interest of Pakistan in terms of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. And the fact that the Pakistani Air Force this time used almost all the military equipment produced by China or jointly produced by China and Pakistan is a firm demonstration of how close the cooperation between China and Pakistan have been and how committed China will continue to be to support Pakistan in defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Before I wrap up, allow me to make one observation. This confrontation demonstrated the extremely successful quality of the Chinese weaponry. Nobody thought that the Chinese J-10C fighter plane, which is not the most sophisticated according to international observation, has prevailed against the most sophisticated fighter plane produced by France or by Europe, as well as by Russia. Now, this is a wake-up call for everyone in the world, especially for the Americans and the Europeans. Don't mess around with China. China has possibly the best military equipment system in the world, not only on the par with that of the United States, but maybe more superior than that. And we need to really promote peace between China and the rest of the world, including between China and the United States. China will do its part to call on peace and stability for development and prosperity between India and Pakistan. On the other hand, China will declare to the world that China and Pakistan are ironclad friends. We are brothers and sisters, and China will never allow any country to bully Pakistan or to violate the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Pakistan.
Victor, was this a glimpse into the power struggle or the great power game in South Asia? And also, what about the Quad? We heard a lot about it during the Biden administration, but with Trump, you haven't really heard anything about the Quad. We've seen more bilateral approaches by Trump towards China when Biden was acting more multilaterally or within alliances. Does Trump's style suit Beijing more? And is Beijing concerned about the Quad still?
Well, I would say former President Trump and his administration was a Cold War president and a Cold War government. It's very dangerous in the world of today. They seemed very eager to promote war after war, sometimes another version of the Cold War, sometimes proxy war, for example. They never seemed satisfied with too many wars in the world of today. That's the danger of the Biden administration. Trump is different. President Trump and his government, hopefully, will be different. And I hope they will not use war as the instrument to achieve whatever goals set up by the United States. Now, on the other hand, I think it is time for the United States to use all its power to bring peace between Israel and Palestine. And I think the United States has a lot of heavy lifting to do to make sure that the Israelis no longer commit crimes of war or atrocities against the legitimate interests of the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza, or to slaughter and kill so many innocent people, including pregnant women and babies. It's a shame for mankind to see such atrocities would take place in the 21st century. And I hope the United States will not turn a blind eye to such atrocities or even get involved in delivering the massive weapons which are used by the Israelis to bomb out the civilian targets in Gaza. That means, for example, every one of us need to do the right thing, and the judgment day will not be too far away if you are involved in destruction of human lives or communities, for example, or if you even have the evil desire to seize the land of the Palestinian people or to seize Gaza by driving out the Palestinian people. I hope the United States, being a very important country in the world of today, will not be complicit in such atrocities and will not join anyone in committing such atrocities against the civilians in Gaza.
I want to ask you a little about Central Asia, geography that's important for China, but also very important for the Turks as well. Both countries seem to be making a lot of inroads there, an area that was more dominated by Russia, but over the past decade or two, China really moving west through that geography, the Turks really moving east through that geography. What type of reception do you expect when Turkish and Chinese influence meet in the Central Asian geography? Will there be cooperation? Will there be confrontation? Will there be competition? How will they receive each other? Because we're going to see them meeting up there. We're going to see them meeting up in the Middle East. We're going to see them meeting up in Africa. Now, as someone who's lived in China for 2 years myself, I feel I have a good understanding of the Chinese, but I never fully understood their perception of Turkey and the Turks. So how do you think that relationship is going to evolve?
First of all, for China and Turkey, we have very good relations. We respect each other and we cooperate very closely with each other. And I will not be surprised that in the coming years and coming decades, China and Turkey friendship and cooperation will be further strengthened. Secondly, Turkey has applied for and will become a full member of the BRICS organization. This is truly extraordinary because Turkey, being a member of NATO, will become a member of the BRICS organization. That means Turkey government and the people are very philosophical. They are really very pragmatic and realistic. They really want to join the BRICS framework for the benefit of the Turkish people. And allow me to mention that it is a complete shame for EU to have repulsed Turkey for all these decades, refusing to allow Turkey to join European Union. This is truly one of the largest shame in human history. And now that Turkey is a member of the BRICS organization, I hope Turkey will work closely with other members of the BRICS organization to make sure that the BRICS organization, which includes many countries in Central Asia actually, will be an organization of peace and stability and development, promoting legitimate interests of all the member states and bring peace and stability to the larger regions, including to Central Asia. Now, as far as Central Asia is concerned, I don't think there is any reason for confrontation between China and Turkey. After all, with all respect to Turkey government and the Turkey people, in terms of the sizes of their economy, China and Turkey are not on the same level. Therefore, they have different roles to play, and they can provide the benefits in their own way to the countries and the people in Central Asia. And I think for many countries in Central Asia, they need to cover both the east side as well as the west side. They want to reach out to the Atlantic as well as to the Pacific. So the more cooperation the Central Asian countries have, the better for their own economy. And I hope China and Turkey can cooperate rather than confront each other in terms of providing real benefits for the governments and the countries and the people in Central Asia.
I also want to ask you about interconnectivity now, Belt and Road Initiative, the Middle Corridor project that Turkey is very, very fond of, the Development Road project that goes through Iraq, probably a logistics route that would be very useful for China as well in the future. How do you see the cooperation between Turkey and China on these types of interconnectivity and logistics projects? Is that going to increase more? Or will the Turks revert back more to the Western camp and try to work with their traditional European and American partners on that?
Well, I would say for the benefit of the people in Turkey, interconnecting with all the countries and people around it, and you are talking about to the west of it, Europe, to the north of it, countries like Ukraine and Russia, and to the east of it, not only China, but Central Asia and South Asia, and then the eastern part of the Eurasian continent as a whole. To the south, you name it, going to the Mediterranean, connected with Middle East and Africa. So you are talking about a total directional connectivity for Turkey. If Turkey chooses only to connect to the West, it will be a huge loss for the Turkish people. And I don't think the government and the leaders and the people in Turkey will be misguided to such an extent to neglect or to disregard the Eastern outlook, the Southeastern outlook, or the Southern outlook, and focusing only on the Western outlook. I think policy of friends with all, enemy with none for Turkey is the best policy for Turkey.
Mm-hmm. One last question. I want to ask you a little more about the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the Gulf, an area where China seems to want to increase its influence, an area that the United States really doesn't want to give up to China as well. How do you see that tug of war going in that region? I know the Chinese were interested in building bases in the UAE. That's something that hasn't materialized yet. And obviously Saudi oil, selling arms to Saudi Arabia. How's that tug of war?
It is true that the United States continues to be very important in this part of the world. And I do think if the United States chooses to do the right thing, they can really have a major impact on this part of the world. But I just hope the impact would for peace and stability rather than war or complicity in the atrocities committed by the Israeli government and the military against the legitimate interests of the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza. On the other hand, it is true that in the case of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they sell more oil to countries to the east rather than to the west. And their export of oil to the United States becomes less and less important. Why? Because the United States has declared it has achieved energy independence. They no longer need to import a lot of oil or gas from outside of the United States. That means for countries like the great Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the UAE or others, they really need to know what is the megatrend in the world of today. China is the megatrend. China has the biggest demand for oil and reserve and gas, for example, and many things produced here in this part of the world. And China can really offer huge amount of finished manufactured products as well as services, you name it, to many countries in this part of the world. China does not want to compete with any other country. China just wants to do business on equal terms with as many countries in this part of the world, all the countries in the Middle East, all the Arab countries, for example, as much as we can. And it does not conflict with the United States, I hope. And in terms of the arms sales, the United States is the biggest arms seller in the world. China is a very small part of that. However, in the coming years and decades, probably because of the attractiveness and the affordability of the Chinese weapons, China may have increasingly large markets in the world, including in this part of the world.
Victor, I have one more minute left. I want a quick take from you on the nuclear talks with Iran. What's China's position?
China supports the denuclearization in the Middle East as a whole, and China supports Iran to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and China considered it as a complete shame for the United States a few years ago to drop out of the Iran nuclear agreement, which China believes is a very good agreement leading towards final discontinuation of any weapons program by Iran involving nuclear weapons. Now we need to pick up from whatever the United States left with, and I hope eventually we should maintain peace and stability in this part of the world. Because if war breaks out between the United States and or Israel with Iran, it will be a huge calamity for peace and stability in this part of the world, as well as in the world at large.
Well, let's hope for more peace, less war. Victor Gao, Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization, thank you for sharing your thoughts with me. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.